Now, quickly before I get into the video, if you could drop a like on the video right now, that would be much appreciated. It takes quite a lot of time to make these videos, and subbing to the channel as well. I'm trying to hit 10K by the end of the month, so if you could hit that subscribe button right now, that would help as well. The trade season has commenced, and we've already seen some big deals. Chris Paul to Phoenix. We've seen Bruce Brown go to the Nets, which people aren't seeing as the kind of blockbuster deal I'm seeing as a Pistons fan. We get in Musa, we get in one of the best shooters of all time, we get in someone that was statistically the worst player in the league, I believe, but those are the kind of blockbuster deals we've seen already. But a team I've been very interested in, among others, is the Dallas Mavericks, because I think they're in a window where they can win a championship as soon as next year. People are probably looking at the team and thinking, oh, give them a couple of years, Luka and Kristaps are still young. Why bother? Why give him a couple of years? Kristaps is entering his prime. Sure, he's got injury concerns, which we'll probably talk about, but Luka is already going to be a top 5, top 10 player in the league. At worst, he's going to be a top 10 player in the league. We saw what he did in the playoffs already in his first playoff series, going up against wing defenders like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Without Kristaps, whatever you think of the Clippers, they had like 3 or 4 very solid wing defenders, including Kawhi and PG, and then you even have guys like Marcus Morris, who are very solid wing defenders, and he did this without his second best player. He was putting up 40 points a night, it seemed like. Those are the kind of things you're working with when you got Luka Doncic. So when you got Luka Doncic, even at 21 years of age, you're still looking to win a championship pretty much every single year. And I think the Mavericks have already shown they're interested in doing so as soon as next year, because there's been trade rumors coming out. And they've been somewhat surprising, because I did expect them to prioritize defense. A Drew Holiday type guy would be the blockbuster move that I think would really propel them forward. But at the same time, they don't want to give up too much, because they also like the kind of role players they have. And I like the role players they have as well. But someone that's recently been rumored is Lou Williams by Jonathan Givony out of ESPN. He said the Mavericks could potentially trade the 18th pick for Lou Will, which you'd probably think is an overpay just first thinking, but in a draft where there's not a ton of star talent that already knows they have a young superstar and a star player, they don't really need to get young talent. They just need to bring in good players, and Lou Will is definitely one of those. He did struggle in the playoffs, which was kind of concerning, but you look back to last year when he played the Warriors, he was incredible, and he was the reason that the Clippers took the Warriors to 6 games, something a lot of teams haven't been able to do against a fully healthy Warriors. You can say the Warriors were kind of clowning around. They were taking them lightly. They still took them to 6 games, and Lou Will averaging over 20 points a game in that series is a big part of it. Also putting up like 8 assists a game. That's pretty impressive numbers. He also did this on very low turnovers. He was incredible throughout that series, and if they could get that kind of production, the 18th pick would not be an overpay, considering he's also on a very friendly contract. When you look at guys around the league like a Dennis Schroeder, I think he's on like 15 million. Lou Will's on about 9 million. I could be mistaken. And the Nuggets series aside, where he was absolutely terrible, I'm not going to excuse anything he did. He was awful in that series. That series aside, he was solid against the Mavs. He was coming back from his things that he had doing in the bubble, whatever he was. He went to Atlanta. Maybe the bubble just wasn't an environment for Lou. That could be the case for some people. That's something that people didn't really take into consideration when you're looking at players that underperformed. Like, it's a completely different environment. There's no fans. You're going away from your family. You're going to a different environment. Like, there's a reason some players might have underperformed that we won't expect to see next year, because it's going to be a completely different playing field. And one reason I think Lou Will might be a priority, now this is just a trade rumor, let me preface this. This is a trade rumor, but the reason I think this has some weight to it is because you look at who the Mavs have been interested in. They've been interested in Zach LaVine, you've got Danilo Gallinari kind of drawing interest, and now you've got Lou Will. What do these 3 players all have in common? They're all offensive-minded players, and Zach LaVine and Lou Will are secondary ball handlers, something that the Mavs have seemingly been after a lot of the time, because when Luka did go out in the playoffs in particular without no Jalen Brunson, and maybe they don't think Jalen Brunson can be that elite secondary playmaker, I think he can be very good, but maybe they don't have that same belief, so maybe they believe they need to get in someone that's an elite secondary playmaker, and someone who's definitely elite at coming off the bench is Lou Williams. He's been elite at coming off the bench for a long time. And why this trade interests me so much, and why I think the Mavericks would probably see this as a good trade, is because you've got someone like Dwight Powell. He's probably going to come off the bench. Maybe if they utilize Kristaps Porzingis in the way they did towards the end of the season, and he was most effective in that way as a center. So if you have Kristaps at the 5 and then Dwight's coming off the bench, you saw what the Clippers could do. You saw what the Clippers did with Montrezl Harrell and Lou Will. Again, in the playoffs, it kind of fell through, but We look back to the Warriors series, they were amazing, and there's a few factors that went into these guys struggling, but we're not going to talk about that. We're talking about what Dwight Powell does. He's a great role man, and he's particularly good as a role man. So you've got someone like Lou Will, who is an excellent pick and roll passer. He's excellent in the pick and roll. So if you've got someone that's great in the pick and roll like Dwight Powell, maybe they think not only can they bring in Lou Will and get production out of that, you're also going to get added production out of someone that you've already got on your books and someone you're probably looking to keep as a very solid role player in Powell. So you have to think of it as not just Lou Will coming in, but you have to think of it as an added 15 to 20%, even more, from Dwight Powell as he gets more touches, as he gets more opportunities at the rim than he would have got with Jalen Brunson, with these other playmakers that are going to come off the bench. So that's a reason I think it would be a good trade, and that's a reason I think the Mavericks might pursue that trade. You then also look at the guys like Zach LaVine, who's been rumored. LaVine was an interesting one for me because Lou Will, you can see it. He's coming off the bench for sure. He's someone that doesn't have the same trade value. He's someone on a friendly contract. He's someone that doesn't play defense. But if Zach LaVine comes in, he's going to be in the starting lineup. He's going to be on some solid money, and he's going to be asked to play a lot of game time, and he's going to be asked to play at the 2 alongside Luka, who I think Luka's an underrated defender. I think he's an average defender, potentially could go above average, maybe even better than that, because he does have the IQ. But I think when you look at Zach LaVine, he's not a good defender, and he's not a particularly good playmaker. Lou Will's a better playmaker than him. He's someone that could utilize more players around him. And then you look at someone else who's been rumored recently is Buddy Hield, another player in that mold. He is someone that apparently has interest in Dallas, and I'd imagine if he has interest in Dallas, Dallas have shown some kind of interest towards him. I would imagine that's just speculation. In terms of what Buddy Hield would do, kind of like Zach LaVine, he's on a pretty hefty contract. You wouldn't have to give up as many assets. So from that perspective, it's probably not as bad, but he's not really a secondary playmaker. He's a good shooter, but they've already got good shooters. I don't think Buddy Hield's a huge upgrade on Hardaway Jr., all things considered. He's definitely a better shooter. And alongside Luka, you could argue he'd go to a different level as a shooter because he's been playing on the Kings offense, and now you move to the best offense in the league alongside one of the best playmakers in the league, and you're going to put up even bigger numbers than before. But in terms of defense, he doesn't offer that playmaking that you're looking for. Like, he's a solid fit, but I don't know if you're paying that kind of money and if you're giving up assets to get him. Don't know if that's the ideal trade for me. Danilo Gallinari is someone that if they could sign with a mid-level exception, I would like that kind of deal. Again, doesn't really have the defense, and then you look at a lineup where he's going to start at the 4, Kristaps is at the 5, Luka's at the 1, and that's 3 guys that still have question marks over their defense, particularly with Kristaps coming back from injury after injury. Whether he can get back to that kind of defensive presence he has had in the past is questionable. And Luka, again, solid defender, not a great one. Tim Hardaway Jr., you've got Seth Curry coming off the bench. Dorian Finney-Smith's a great defender, but there's just not a great deal of defenders in that lineup. So that's why I think the trade that I'd be looking for is Lou Will. I think that's a perfect fit. I really like the idea of that coming off the bench, utilizing Dwight Powell, giving him more touches, giving Luka a rest, because when he went out in the playoffs particularly, the Mavericks struggled. They really struggled, and that's why he was so desperate to get on the floor. Even with a rolled ankle, he had to do so. And so you're bringing in Lou Will, who's going to shoulder that load. They're not going to ask for too much. I think the 18th pick would be a pretty solid deal, particularly if Lou Will decides that he wants to leave, then the Clippers won't really be left with much other choice. But you've got that as a potential option. And then I think what they should do is target 3-and-D wings in free agency. A lot of those 3-and-D wings you're going to be able to get through free agency. You've got guys like Jay Crowder, Justin Holiday, those kind of guys are going to be on the market. And if you've got a team like Dallas offering them solid enough money, a good role, a chance at a championship, a chance at playing alongside one of the best players in the league, one of the best offenses in the league, there's a lot of reasons for a player like those guys to be interested in going to Dallas. So I think they've got enough confidence that they can sign someone through free agency instead of making a trade for one of the 3-and-D wings. And that would be my priority list. A trade for Lou Will really does spark my interest. Even though at first it was kind of an interesting trade, I didn't know if it would be the perfect fit. But when you look into it, you know the Mavericks need a secondary ball handler. You know Lou Will's definitely not a good defender. But in terms of the things considered, in terms of what he brings to other players, not just himself, I could see that working out. And his friendly contract is certainly a big thing as well. And then through free agency, you get in a couple of 3-and-D wings, and all of a sudden your team's looking very stacked for next year. If Kristaps can stay healthy, that's a big if. Say Kristaps stays healthy, this is a lineup that you could be rolling out. You've got Luka, you've got Tim Hardaway Jr., you've got Jay Crowder, you've got Dorian Finney-Smith, you've got Kristaps, you've got the flexibility of having Dwight Powell come in and fill in, which I'm sure they'll keep Dwight Powell at this stage. Before I thought he could be shipped off, but there's no way they're trading someone that is crucial now with Kristaps' injury concerns. You need a great backup center and someone that can start as a center as well, and he's exactly that. You've also got some flexibility with Maxi Kleber coming off the bench, and then if you bring in Lou Will, and you have guys like Maxi Kleber and Dwight Powell in the second unit alongside Lou Will, you know he's going to feed them and you know he's going to boost their production. So that's something that just helps out the whole team. Seth Curry as well. All of a sudden, that's a 9-man rotation that's looking incredibly scary without making many drastic moves towards their future. If you keep Jalen Brunson as well, that's another guard that can create. That's another guard that's very solid. And that team is looking stacked, and that's a team that I think is going to contend. It's a stacked Western Conference. It's a stacked league in general, but the Dallas Mavericks, if they just make a few smart moves, I don't think they need to make a crazy move, and Lou Will would be a smart move in my opinion. I've really turned the corner on him. I think he would be a good fit because of what he does for other players, more so than just himself, and then if they can bring in a 3-and-D wing as well, I think that would probably be priority one. They need to bring in someone like a Jay Crowder, which they're definitely capable of doing, and then a secondary playmaker. This team's legit. This is a top 3, top 4 seed in the West in a stacked Western Conference. It's going to be so hard to pick who's going to be the best team in the league. You've got even the Phoenix Suns are going to be incredibly good with Chris Paul and Devin Booker, the Denver Nuggets, the Golden State Warriors, both LA teams. You really can't pick it, but what I know is if the Dallas Mavericks make a few smart moves, which they look rumored to be doing, they're going to be a hard team to beat, and they're definitely one of the most interesting teams to me in the league, just because of their age profile and just because of how many different things they can do. Given that age profile, they don't really need to prioritize getting in young players and trying to build and trying to be smart. Because when you've got a superstar player like Luka and a very good player like Kristaps, both yet to even enter their prime, and those guys are locked away for a couple more years, then what it means is you've already got your franchise sorted there, and the rest of the franchise is just going to be moving pieces around them because those two players alone are enough to compete as long as you keep moving pieces around them. So that's why the Mavericks are in such a solid position that they could take a gamble on a 30-plus-year-old Lou Will and it could work out. It's not far-fetched to say they could end up with Jay Crowder, Justin Holiday, and Lou Williams, and then all of a sudden this is one of the best teams in the league, which they already have a chance to be. If you did make it to the end of the video, you may as well drop a like. You might have enjoyed it. I don't know. Subscribe to the channel as well.